So, firstly, thank you, Belinda, for that lovely introduction and for inviting me. I feel like she's now set the bar very high and I need to say some good stuff. So, I'm going to be talking about adventurous play in children. I'm a child psychologist. I'm a professor of child psychology at the University of Exeter. My research is funded by UK Research and Innovation. So, I'm fortunate to have 7 years of research funding and I'm 3 years into that. So, some of this is a work in progress, some of it is done. And I love it and I'm happy to chat about it. And I could talk all day, but Belinda's told me about 25 minutes, so I'll do my best to only talk for 25 minutes. I'm going to start with some bad news. Sorry about that, everybody. So this is the context, right? This is why I do this work. It's why Belinda's passionate about it. Between 2004 and 2017, in England, there's a 49% increase in emotional disorders in 5 to 15-year-olds. Subsequently, since 2017 to the latest estimates, it's gone up again by 50%. So currently, 1 in 6 children in the UK has a diagnosable mental health condition. I don't think that's okay, right? We're doing something wrong if 1 in 6 children has a mental health problem. Right? They haven't even finished their childhood yet. 1 in 6 of them are not doing okay. So what are we doing wrong as a society that means that 1 in 6 children have a mental health problem? So I want you to bear with me for a little while. I'm going to take you on a little adventure through some play research. You might all be sat there thinking, why is she talking about play? I want to know about adventures, right? I want to know about expeditions, and she's talking about play. Bear with me. I will come back to adventure, and all will become clear, hopefully, at some point later on. So let's talk about play. What is play? Similar to the discussions we've already had today about what is adventure, people have written whole books about what play is and play isn't and play might be. These are the definitions that I like. Play is what children and young people do when they're not being told what to do. I actually prefer it's what people do when they're not being told what to do, because I think all of us also play. And it takes place whenever and wherever opportunities arise. So no, you don't need to get on an aeroplane in order to play. Free play happens when children decide what they're doing. So it's not adults saying, oh, look at this nice activity, we can do this. It's letting children decide what they want to do. Right? They need stimulating environments in order to have exciting things to choose to do, but children choose what they do. They choose when they start, they choose when they stop, they choose who they play with, they choose whether you're in the room or not, they choose whether you join in or not, and when you join in, you do what they tell you to do, not what you think you should be doing because you're the adult, right? So that's what free play is. Free play is great for lots of reasons. Firstly, it's enjoyable because who chooses to do something that they don't actually like doing? It increases children's sense of control. So lots of childhood, children have no sense of control whatsoever, right? You have to get up at this time, have your breakfast at this time, wear these particular clothes, we'll take you to this place, you don't have a choice, you have to be there at 9 o'clock. And then the adults will tell you what to do until 3 o'clock, and then I'll pick you up and I'll take you somewhere else and you're going to do da-da-da-da-da. And maybe in there's a little bit of time where the children have some control over what they do. And this is what they should be doing during that time. Let them decide, and then they have, for a moment, some sense of control. Children can use free play to make sense of things that are going on around them, help them to express themselves. It supports relationships because they begin to trust that adults trust them and that they will give them space and they're not always telling them what to do. And importantly, it facilitates adventurous play. So if we give children the space and opportunity to explore, they will explore risks and they'll do adventurous things. That's not us telling them, oh, you're going to go climb up this thing because that will be really exciting. It's them deciding what they want to do, what feels right for them. So that's free play. Here are some examples of how children use play to make sense of what's going on around them and to express themselves. So during the pandemic, I worked with a museum to create an archive of children's pandemic-related play. So I've got 2 examples here. So this little boy, this is exactly what the mum said. This is a photo of my 2-year-old son working from home. My husband has been working from home since the start of the pandemic, and my son now often role plays going to work at his desk in the living room. He puts his backpack on and he makes sure he's got full supply of coffee on his desk. So this child has noticed something weird is going on here, like daddy's always home and he drinks coffee and he sits at his desk. So they role play it. They're using play to work out and make sense of what's going on. Here's another example. These are 2 girls who are sisters, age 4 and age 6, and they spent time creating a medicine for the virus. And this was before there was any kind of vaccine or anything about the vaccine. They were just doing it. And they created this medicine. They put on dressing up clothes to protect them from all the chemicals. And they spent a long time mixing the medicine. Then they test it out on their toys and they'd adjust it. These children are a little bit older, so you can see a little bit more of understanding that this is a virus, it needs medicine, the medicine might be dangerous, you might need to tweak the medicine, but again, they're using play to make sense of those things. So, what do we know about play? We know from children who are hospitalised primarily, that's the strongest research, that play is good for reducing stress and negative emotion. The reason that a lot of this research is on hospitalised children is because when children are in hospital, their play experiences are generally pretty terrible. So you can quite easily go in and make them better, and then you can see what happens when you make them better. In the real world, we don't want to take play away from some children in order to have a comparison group. So it's kind of harder to get that evidence outside of those contexts, although that's, some of the stuff we're doing is trying to do that. So when hospitalised children are given time for free play, their stress decreases. Children who are admitted to hospital for treatment show lower levels of anxiety and fewer negative emotions if they get to take part in a play intervention. So play is good for children emotionally, helps them with anxiety and stress. Oh, this slide's got a different format. Okay, we also know that being in nature is good for children's mental health and adults, everybody's, humans' mental health. So visits to nature are associated with decreased stress. Children living in environments with high levels of green space, so if they can see green out of their window, if they can access it easily, are less likely to develop a psychiatric disorder. If we green play spaces, so we make them more natural, and we put things like mud and plants and things into those spaces, then we encourage more complex and diverse play, promotes longer duration of play, it increases children's physical activity, and it improves their attention, right? So play is good. Nature's good. Everyone on board so far? Yeah? Good. This is a quote from a Newsround article. Children are allowed to comment on Newsround articles and adults are not. And this child said, I think it's rather sad that playgrounds have shut during COVID because it can give me a chance to breathe. And that's what play is for children. It's their breath, right? It's space to breathe, just be a child. Okay? It's important enough for a child to describe it as breath. So now we bring in adventure, okay? So until a few years ago, all of my work was on children's mental health, not about play and not about adventure. And I've done quite a lot of work looking at the development of anxiety, what predicts anxiety, why do some children become anxious, and thinking about how we can support children when they're 3, 4, 5 years old and their families to make sure that fewer children become anxious. Lots of what we do then is based on therapy that we do with adults. So we take this kind of adult model and we take it to the 3-year-olds and we say, let's try and stop these kids from being anxious. And I still do some of that work, but if I'm being totally honest, it's not very exciting for a 3 or 4-year-old to do some cognitive behavioural therapy. I know, it's like shocking, isn't it? And their parents are kind of busy and the kid's not anxious yet, so do I want to come and see this psychologist for like the next 10 weeks? Not really. And so it always felt like there's a kind of mismatch. Like, do we really need to be doing therapy when children are that young? Shouldn't we be thinking about how we get the environment right? How do we get childhood right so that those children aren't becoming anxious? Not through some kind of medical model, but just through what should childhood look like? What would an ideal childhood look like? An ideal childhood doesn't include CBT. So I took what I knew about risk factors for anxiety and I proposed this theoretical model which says adventure and adventurous play can do all the things that we try and do when we do CBT. So we don't need to do CBT, we just need to let children play, which they've evolved to do, they know how to do, all we need to do is get out of their way. So this is the model for anyone that's interested. It is about 37 pages long, so I wouldn't recommend reading it in the evening unless you want something to help you go to sleep. There are some quite nice online, very short blogs that I've written of like 300 words that explain everything you need to know, so you don't need to read the whole thing if you don't want to. So I have a definition of adventurous play, which I'm happy to debate about all evening if you want to. But the definition I use is that it's exciting and thrilling play where the child experiences a level of fear and is able to take age-appropriate risks. The age-appropriate, I know, roll your eyes. But basically, I'm trying to highlight that it's not about children actually breaking bones every day, right? It's risks that feel right to them. And it feels exciting and thrilling, and it gets you to that outside of your comfort zone, but not the point where you're terrified. Okay? So the key take-home, if the only thing that you listen to, me rambling on, is this. If you avoid doing something and you don't do it, then you don't learn anything. Simple. Don't do it. don't learn. Don't find anything out other than maybe how it feels to not do it. If you do something, we call that exposure as psychologists, but basically it's doing. When you do something, you learn something, right? So those of you who are in my parkour group knew, maybe, some of you would have seen that I did not want to jump from one bench to the other because I thought I was going to fall off and hurt myself, and I really didn't want to do it. But with the support of a lovely group of people, I did do it, and I learned something. You know what? I can jump from one bench to the other and not fall off and hurt myself. I could have not done it, and I'd be standing here and the only thing I'd be able to tell you is that I didn't jump, right? But I did it, and I learned something. This is my son jumping from one rock to another at a beautiful beach in Devon, where we're lucky enough to live. Every time he does this jump, he learns something about his body, right? He learns how it feels to land. He learns about balance, and he's also tweaking those muscles, right, as he does that. And he's learning about how it feels to push himself, and he's learning what's too far, what's too much, okay? So we have to do things in order to learn things. So there are three, in our theoretical model, there are three different aspects of sort of factors that underpin anxiety that I think adventurous play can allow children to learn about. And when they learn about those things, they should be at decreased risk for anxiety. So I'm very quickly going to go through those things now. So this is about exposure, right? They do the thing, and when they do the thing, they learn something. These are the things they learn. So one of the things is about coping. We know that when children are anxious, they use what we call maladaptive coping skills. That means they cope in a way that's not very effective and not good for their mental health. So coping is important. We want children to learn how to cope well and effectively and in a healthy way. Phil Kendall, who's kind of the pioneer of sort of anxiety treatment for children, describes an effective treatment as one that leads children to acquire a coping template. And I really like that idea that it's like a template. It's not telling you exactly how to do it, because how Belinda copes and how you cope will be totally different because you're different people. But you have a template for you so that you know, when I'm in this difficult situation, I can do this, this, and this, and that works for me. And you carry that with you, right? So when we're treating anxious kids, we want to give them those skills so that they know how to cope. When we improve coping and treatment, anxiety also improves. So if we want to prevent anxiety, children need an opportunity to learn how to cope in an adaptive way. They need to practice that. If you think of coping as a muscle, they need to practice coping. What might they do to practice coping? Any ideas? Anybody? Maybe they might play, maybe take some adventures. So we've heard lots of, I think Linda, when you were talking earlier, you talked about uncertainty a lot, and we heard it as well in the last presentation. So intolerance of uncertainty is when an individual does not like uncertainty, avoids uncertainty, has lots of negative kind of cognitions and feelings about uncertainty. It is robustly associated with anxiety and worry in adults and in children. In fact, I should have said that earlier. Everything that I'm saying applies to adults. I'm interested in children and development, but any of you who are working with adults can also learn how to cope, and they can learn about uncertainty, right? So adults and children who are high in intolerance to uncertainty, that they don't like uncertainty, they're more likely to be anxious. When we change intolerance to uncertainty and get people more okay with uncertainty in treatment, their anxiety symptoms also improve. So if we want to reduce intolerance to uncertainty and reduce children's risk for anxiety, they need to be exposed to some uncertainty in order to learn about it, okay? Exposure, learning. And finally, physiological arousal, right? Who's felt their heart racing, their palms are sweaty, their stomach feels like it's churning, right? These are all part of our normal physiological response to feeling excited, feeling scared, feeling worried, nervous. Again, children need to learn about those to understand. So when I was jumping from one bench to the other, or not, as the case may be, I was thinking, oh, my heart's racing a little bit, and that's fine. I'm totally okay with that, because I know that's what my body does when I'm feeling those emotions. Nothing to worry about. If I've never felt that feeling before, and then for the first time my heart's doing this thing, that's going to be kind of scary and confusing, and I might think something's wrong. So anxiety sensitivity refers to this kind of fear of fear. So fear of those things that happen. I hate feeling scared. I'm not comfortable with those feelings, those things that happen in my body. And again, that's associated with anxiety disorders. We change it in treatment, it improves anxiety. So again, if we want children to learn about those feelings, learn that they can manage them, learn that they're normal, understand them, children need the opportunity to feel it, to feel that arousal. So in summary, exposure is key. Exposure is required for learning. When children are exposed to adventure, through their play or through an organised activity. Then they have opportunity to learn to cope, they have opportunity to learn to tolerate uncertainty, and they have opportunity to learn about physiological arousal. Right, so I'm hoping this is going to work. I'm going to try and play this clip. So this is some children playing at Triangle Adventure Playground in London. As we're watching it, I want you to be thinking about what these children are experiencing in this moment. So uncertainty, coping, arousal. Okay?
This is an obstacle course that me, and here we go. 3, 2, 1. So we made an obstacle course, and we involved lots of dangerous bits.
She said we built an obstacle course and we involved lots of dangerous bits.
Keep going.
At this point, has she lost her shoe already? Yeah, no shoe.
Since the last time I saw you.
And she's done it. Yeah, there we go. That's what we call an obstacle course. So hopefully that kind of brings some of that to life, right? You can see those children, they're creating actually more uncertainty, right? With the rope swing, that little girl, like she doesn't want to get up, she can't get up, it's too hard to get up, and then she keeps going, and she gets up, and then, you know, I was thinking about when you were talking earlier about getting up the volcano, right? It's on a very small scale, but it's the same thing. It's like, I can't do it, but I want to do it, and I'm going to keep going and get through. These are some quotes of what children think about adventurous play, and they say things like, I did it once and I did okay, and I felt happy and scared at the same time. I couldn't stop myself. You feel excited because you're out of your comfort zone, but you're enjoying yourself. I feel free and confident on top of the world because I'm really high. Like, how great is that? Who doesn't want to give children those feelings, right? So, time for me to talk about my own research. So I wrote this theoretical paper and I'm like, yes, definitely, you know, adventurous play is the way ahead. And now I'm like, how do I do the research to try and test out these hypotheses? And so in just as COVID started, we did a national survey of play in Britain, so Scotland, Wales, and England, which is called the British Children's Play Survey, if anyone's interested in it, where we looked at where children are playing, how much they're playing, how adventurously they're playing, and we also looked at their mental health. And then we did a separate study in Northern Ireland with a smaller sample asking the same questions. We asked, I won't explain why we did it in Northern Ireland. If anyone wants to know, I'll explain later. So in both samples separately, we looked at the association between the amount of time children spent playing adventurously and their mental health. And what we found was consistent associations across those two samples. So the more adventurous playtime children had, the better their mental health was. Unadventurous play was not linked to better mental health, right? So there's something about the adventure and the outdoor kind of aspect of play. The associations were stronger in children from low-income families. So adventurous play is more closely related to mental health in children who are growing up in low-income families, which makes sense, I think, for lots of reasons. One being children in higher income families, their parents are more likely to be taking them on adventure trips, right? They might be going on a ski holiday in the winter. So the adventurous play that they do, where it's just kind of child-led play, maybe is less important because they're getting those adventure experiences somewhere else. Also, children from low-income families are more likely to face some kind of adversity. And if what we're thinking is that this is, you know, resilience, essentially, then when faced with more adversity, that resilience becomes more important. So we've got some initial evidence. We're going to do some longitudinal work where we follow people up. We're also doing some work in schools, which I'll talk about in a minute. So we're trying to kind of get the evidence about adventurous play and mental health and think about really evaluating those ideas from the theory. There is also, you know, outside of my own work, a wide range of research on the effects of adventure therapy, which is different. It's not what, you know, my work is about adventurous play, but there's some indication there that adventure itself is good for mental health, right? So it makes sense that that would transfer across to play. So I want to finish by saying a little bit about play in schools. I don't think there's probably not many of you here who work in schools, but this is my soapbox thing, and I know Belinda's on board with this as well. So I'm going to talk briefly about play in schools, and then I will finish up. These are some pictures that I put on a slide, and I can't remember what I was going to say. So when I looked at my slides this morning, I remember looking for the pictures, and I was like, no clue. So we'll just move on. So 20% of the school day is spent outside of formal lessons, right? So it's approximately the same amount of the school day that's spent on maths and on phonics. And yet, almost no schools in England spend any time planning or thinking about that 20% of the school day. Okay, so most schools open the door, out you go, square a tarmac, come back in half an hour later. And as my child put it, all we can do is run round and round and round in circles, and then we come back in. And it's good. I mean, they're running, but running round and round in circles and then coming back in is perhaps not the most exciting. So why does it matter? Why should we be thinking about play in schools? Aren't schools doing enough? The reason it matters is, this is a statistic from 2015. So in 2015, 1.3 million children in the UK spent no time in natural spaces, right? So they're not doing it outside of school. We need to do something about that, but we also need to accept that some children are not getting it outside of school, right? Some children go home from school on a Friday and they don't leave the house or flat they live in until they go back to school on Monday morning, right? So we can try and change that, but we can also think about the opportunities they get when they're in school. Our own work, the British Children's Play Survey, we asked parents, what age did they go out by themselves, right? Starting to have those adventures out with your friends, away from your parents. Parents told us that they went out at about age 9. And we said, what age will you let your child go out by themselves? 11, right? So within one generation, 2 years difference. That's 2 years of adventures and fun and exploring and negotiating your environment and your social relationships that children are not doing because they have to be with their parents, because parents aren't letting them out until 2 years later. I always like to say, I'm not blaming parents. I am a parent, not blaming parents, because parents are bringing up their children in this environment, right? And it's all of it. It's society, it's how busy roads are, it's whether there's anywhere they can cross the road, it's whether the parks are any good, whether the children can go without the police telling them to get home. It's lots of things. It's not just about parent decision making. And after school, the most common place for children to go is home. The proportion of children going to play at a friend's house or playing and meeting with friends after school has also declined over the past 15 to 20 years. So they're not spending time in nature, they're not going home with their friends after school, they're not meeting their friends after school, they're just going home. So what happens in school actually becomes really important. So we are doing some work in schools. We're trying to get schools doing really great play during their play times, letting children take risks, doing some training with staff, stop butting in, they know what they're doing, leave them alone, and only kind of step in when you think somebody is actually going to end up in an ambulance. Otherwise, let them climb the trees. Some of you might have heard of a school in New Zealand that's sometimes referred to as a school with no rules, where they just basically got rid of all the rules except you can't hurt anybody else and you can't damage property. And anecdotally, they describe fantastic positive effects that that's had on children. So these kids can bring their bikes to school, they can scoot around the playground, they can climb up things and jump off them, if that's what they can do anything they like, right? And that school say it's been amazingly beneficial. So we're trying to do some work on that, do some evaluation in terms of if we improve playtimes, what happens to children's mental health. As Belinda was talking earlier about trying to get the wheelchair up the volcano, I like to cry easily. I'm very emotionally moved. And I was like, tears in my eyes. And then that made me think of the thing that actually has made me cry this year, which was a school that we were working in, which had a child in a wheelchair. And that child didn't go outside at break time or at lunchtime. They sat in the library by themselves in their wheelchair. And so I think, we need sometimes to adjust a little bit in terms of what our goal is. So yeah, it'd be amazing if everyone was able to go on some massive expedition and have, crazy weeks in the jungle. But also it'd be amazing if children just got to go outside, right? And they got to go into nature and they got to have some fun and some freedom. And so, whilst I'm all for, go for some big goals, let's also not forget the easy wins. You know, we don't need to get on a plane. We can do things very locally on a very small scale. I love the phrase everyday adventures. You know, that's what we want for children throughout their childhood so that they develop these skills. So what now? We need to stop neglecting play and playtime in schools and outside of schools, I think, and think about it in terms of using it to support children's holistic well-being. Children need outdoor play, they need to be physically active, they need contact with nature, and they need opportunity to control their environment and have adventures. And this is not only 3, 4 and 5-year-olds, which is what government policy might lead you to believe. It's everybody. It's all through childhood, it's all through adolescence, and probably into adulthood as well. That's me. Thank you.